Hello and welcome once again. I'm here today with my friend Ford.
Thank you for inviting me on.
No problem at all. I invited you on because I frequently have sort of political discussions with you, and in a way that any friends who you discuss politics with sort of influence your opinions of politics. I think your thoughts and your observations have influenced some of my political thinkings. It's
I'm flattered.
well, I think that's maybe some of the people watching will be able to benefit from your wide body of knowledge on the on the subject of politics and conservatism in particular.
Hopefully.
The other reason I brought you on was because you are a homosexual man.
Yes, I'm one of them queer-sexuals.
Yeah. And since the Jacob Rees-Mogg sort of incident where he came out as being against gay marriage on the talk show, I felt confident speaking about women's rights being a woman, but I didn't really feel like I could necessarily get away with talking about gay rights since I'm heterosexual. So I'm obviously interested in what you have to say on issues that affect you personally. But first of all, let's just give an introduction to what you believe politically. So where would you put yourself on the political compass?
Actually, it's funny because depending on which side of the world I'm on, depending if I'm here in the UK or somewhere like Malaysia, for example, I'd probably be on a different set of parties, of course, depending on the scenario. But for the most part, I consider myself centre-right. So,
okay.
Sort of conservative liberal. So
yeah. You I was going to mention you were canvassing for our Conservative Member of Parliament, right?
Yeah.
So I was pretty proud of you actually, because I suggested it to you, kind of thinking that you wouldn't do it. But was my suggestion that you do canvassing part of your decision to do it?
Yeah.
Cool.
But quite a bit, not this sort of general push, eventually with my own interest in particularly with the political situation as it is and as it stands now as well. Yes. Yeah,
I didn't actually have the courage to do it myself because I've never really fully identified as conservative. I voted Conservative in this election just kind of by default because I thought that Jeremy Corbyn was so much of an emergency. It was.
That was same with me. That was the other half of the reason I got pushed. I decided to canvass.
I still couldn't feel quite brave enough to go out and tell people to vote for Conservative because I don't really have any love for the Conservative Party in the past. But I'm really glad that you did, and I'm really proud of you, actually. But I think what I've said before is that if Jacob Rees-Mogg does end up being the next Conservative leader in the
next leader hopeful.
Yeah, if he was in
the party at the least.
Yeah, if he was the next party leader for the next election, I think I probably would be out there canvassing with you. So
likewise,
we'd be shoulder to shoulder, harassing the general public.
Indeed.
Yeah, that would be. I kind of look forward to it. I hope that he is the next Conservative MP.
I'm not getting my hopes up too high at the moment because he's so far declined. He's flattered by, of course, the amount of support that he's gaining.
Yeah.
But he's basically consistently urging, including supporters that were coming up to him, asking, would you run for Legion? And they all met with the same response. No, I don't intend to run for the next leadership election at any point, at least as far as we know.
Yeah.
But that he's putting his confidence and weight behind Theresa May and that we should back her in turn.
Yeah, I do wonder if he's being a bit too nice. He's trying to show support for the party because he knows that party infighting is a real it's a real dead weight for any political party. Yeah. But I wonder if he's not being dishonest but just trying to show his support of Theresa May. But of course he doesn't want to. If you wanted to be Prime Minister, the last thing you should do is to appear sort of power grabbing. So I wonder if he is...
Or rock the boat, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't want to sort of stage a coup against Theresa May.
Which is very much the events of what happened today. There's been allegations on a senior Tory, apparently an alleged, plan to try and get Theresa May to resign. So, of course, so someone else can occupy the party. And when I'm muddy on the details so far, but it might be something to do with the Brexit negotiations and what she stands for. No, but nonetheless, I feel like she's probably the only real, major political leader at the moment that is throwing away behind Brexit.
Yeah.
And the closer to wholeheartedly is concerned, certainly you're not going to get down Jeremy Corbyn, who for a while showed promise in that sort of like saying that he was prepared to dedicate it, pro-EU faction of Labour be damned, but now he's flipped back on it. And this could be a potential source of losses for him. And also, even if he were to, get to the negotiating table, one thing that Corbyn doesn't understand is power politics. He doesn't understand that it isn't just appease. You've got to apply leverage at points in order to get the best situation, to basically get the best outcome.
Yeah, sort of tough love or...
tough love, effectively, like that. Yeah, and even by principle of tough love, we're still nonetheless basically following on the same ground that the EU put forward what Juncker said, that out is out. So I don't know what all this fuss out of, doing a half semi-Brexit or something like that. That's nonsense at all.
So during the run-up to the last general election, there was a lot of talk on sort of social media and just in general, sort of our friends who vote Labour who would consistently... Not all of them, of course, but there was this sort of meme going around that Conservatives they're not interested in gay rights, or they're against they hate gay people, they're full of homophobes, and just that sort of that's a pretty common trope, right? People think that the Conservatives and Republicans in America are anti-gay. So, what are your feelings about supporting a party that a lot of people say is homophobic?
Well, certainly there is some, credibility to those claims maybe in the past with, Clause 28 and, of course, prior opposition to other LGBT-affirming policy. Under Cameron's, I think, in Cameron's first premiership, there was, of course, the Marriage Act of 2013, which saw, sweeping reform which allowed religious organisations such as the Quakers and certain, certain Jewish organisations to allow, legally solemnize partnerships, same-sex partnerships, given their blessing.
Yeah, under the Conservative government.
Under the Conservative government. Albeit this is all more controversial because I know it was drawn up and it was given its first reading by a Conservative representative. It nonetheless got, more, and it passed mainly due to the weight that Labour still had behind it, since there was a near unanimous support from the Labour side. However, most of the opposition came from the Conservative MPs, and it's interesting because I'm happy with the legislation as it is. I hope it stays for and so far.
Allowing gay marriage.
Yeah, allowing gay marriage. I like the terms of it, what it is now. But one thing, however, if there was ever a scenario where a more religiously conservative or socially conservative government came into place, or there was enough of clout in parliaments that such things were, reformed so that they were very much, swept away, I wouldn't see it as a tragedy or something, all this, harbinger thing to come back. And I guess that perspective came from looking at, gay rights elsewhere. Particularly in Malaysia, where the main goal of the movement in their priority is simply the ability for gay individuals to live openly.
Yeah, and you said that you lived in Malaysia for how many years?
I think about 2 years, and I do have connection and somewhat of a connection out there because my father works out there, and he pretty much is a resident out there.
Yeah.
And every time I go back there, every once a year. Even looking at something like I think it was Anwar Ibrahim, who also was, I think was imprisoned on false sodomy charges and removed for political reasons, which was probably all trumped up. But one thing he's actually said about, gay rights is that, decriminalisation of, same-sex sexual activity, and, promoting a much more open perspective on the whole thing. But the one thing that's never a priority on them is gay marriage at all. In fact, I think Anwar Ibrahim stated outright that it's ludicrous. Because here we have this whole, progressives have this whole deal that it's an inalienable right to marry. And this brings me to sort of a question that you've asked me and I've sort of asked myself, how do I regard the role of marriage in society? and the difference between that and civil partnerships. Well, with civil partnerships, it's more like a straightforward secular, like legal state marriage thing, like that. It's more for the recognition and also the sort of like benefits that come with it.
Yeah, I think it's. I've said this about the rights of women to vote. Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
But it's when you think about why women should have the vote, and they absolutely should. It's important to think that it's not that women will necessarily vote for different politicians to men. It's the fact, it's kind of like a symbolic thing where when you don't give women the vote, it's kind of like you're saying women are equivalent to criminals and children. In voting status, exactly. You're equating them to people who are incapable of contributing to the society
or thinking for themselves.
Exactly. So I think it's a similar thing with gay rights. Right? So sort of equal marriage. It's the symbolic, like representation of marriage versus civil partnership that they're participating in the same things that straight people are. Is that what you're saying? I thought that's what you were trying to say about.
What am I trying to say? Basically, partnerships are something onto themselves, and they have their own benefits, and they're more, marriage and ceremony in the legal sense. But however, in the religious sense, where ultimately I feel it stems from, it should be defined really by the consensus of the religious institutions that give the blessings and perform the ceremonies. Like, for instance, if the Unitarians and the Quakers want to do same-sex wedding, they should be free to do so.
Yeah.
But however, likewise, the Catholic Church and various other more conservative organisations should be allowed to define their marriages as heteronormative if they want to. If they not saying they want to, but if their morality dictates it, so.
Well, what I've heard some libertarians saying is that government should not be in charge of marriage in the first place. It should be a very
Benny Shapiro thing, which is it, and that's something that I've been examining more and more.
In the future, if you were to find someone who you wanted to marry or stay committed to for the rest of your life, would you see any benefit, sort of spiritually or symbolically, to being married to that person rather than having a civil partnership with them?
I remember being some interview, I think it may have been a BBC programme or something like that, and it was I think it was two gay Anglican men, and they basically are remaining celibate until marriage, or something like that, but marriage, and at that point, I think it was 2012 or even prior to that, they basically can't go through that.
Because they're Christians.
Yeah, they're sort of Christians, and that sort of regards sort of the ethics, something like for instance, if I was particularly, involved in the Catholic faith, but still somewhat, secure with my own sexuality, it would be, and the compromise that would come to that would be celibacy, and like that. And I would not, take it upon myself to pressure, the Catholic Church to give me the same, ceremonial.
But that's a big it's a big sacrifice. I mean, if you were such a devout Christian that you were sort of devoting yourself to celibacy for your entire life until gay marriage is allowed, that's a big sacrifice to have to make for your religion. Or what would you say to the people who think that the Conservative Party is homophobic?
All I could particularly say is at least the more homophobic members of the party are way better than, say, the more homophobic things of a Muslim Conservative Party in, say, Malaysia, which is one of the moderate countries, who not only believe that they should be in prison, but some of them should be put to death. Because here the worst that they could have done since post 1967 was Eurasia, which is basically what happened with Clause 28. We were sort of like a category or nothing in sex education or something. We weren't allowed to be talked about in some sort of positive or affirming light. And, that was sort of the basis for Clause 28. It's very similar to, say, Russia's, quote, gay propaganda law, which basically banned the promotion of, positive or sort of anything like that seek to educate people on, the existence of gay people and the health issues that they face.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if it was Russia that censored the episode of Steven Universe with two lesbian characters in it, and they gave one of the characters a moustache to make it look like a man. Did you hear about that?
That happened?
No, I don't know if it was Russia, but that definitely happened in one very conservative country where they were not happy with two lesbian characters being in a
Why
cartoon.
why were they showing Steven Universe at all? They really were getting that much money from syndication and they were willing to air the show that they know had this.
I never asked myself that question, you know.
Like...
You were the friend who recommended that I read The Fountainhead over the Atlas Shrugged, so you've got some people to answer to. The people who told me to read Atlas Shrugged are pretty mad at you right now. So when did
Maybe I'll answer them.
When did you first read Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead?
I'm not really sure really how I came across the book itself or even found out about Ayn Rand. It feels like at some point in late high school I decided to buy a copy of The Fountainhead from like Waterston's or something. And it was a very rough first reading of it. And I never really sort of clicked with anything. I wasn't particularly, hip to certain philosophical concepts or sort of like that. I just heard that apparently it's this really important novel and I decided to go along with it. So, and I sat on it for a while. And then in the meanwhile, I got sort of like interested in sort of like, many shades of politics. Like, I think there's libertarian politics at first, more, sort of liberal politics, even socialist politics. And eventually back to conservative politics. And then I think about a year or so ago, I picked up The Fountainhead again and reread it, and now it's a favourite. Right there, it clicks more now. And basically, I just realised that there is a through line, even though I didn't get the book the first time. Philosophically, at least for me personally, like sort of its efficacy of reason. It's sort of like emphasis on the individual and the return to that sort of politics that is based around the protection of the individual and his interests is like a point of return from going into ideologies that I argue muddy those waters quite a bit and only serve to just create more confusion and generally they just don't seem real to me, or something like that. The sort of collectivist ideologies, or the sort of hardline socialism, and even the sort of like Marxist-Leninist communism that I tried to study. And
something that I thought was really interesting about Ayn Rand is that what's interesting about her is that she never, well, I suppose at the time she was writing it was a little bit different, but instead of arguing against collectivism and communism as the way most people argue against it and going like, it obviously doesn't work, like it's never worked whenever it's been tried. She doesn't even say that. She doesn't even touch on that. She's like morally repelled by the ideas of communism and collectivism. Like she thinks they're morally wrong, which is going one step further than most people.
Yeah, she believed that they were basically the through line of those ideologies was altruism.
Yeah.
Which she believed was, dishonest. It was effectively a way for people to sacrifice themselves to the point where they basically are allowed to be controlled, effectively like that. And this was a criticism she levied against the communism of the communism of the Russia she fled. And then also, of course, the same attitude applied also to fascism, towards the sort of hardline nationalist movements in Europe, which is pretty funny because I found out that one of her earlier books, We the Living, was adapted in Italy under Mussolini, and it was banned after a few weeks and I think like a few months or something like that, because they found that it contained not only anti-communist themes but anti-fascist themes as well.
And would you like to briefly go into why you think The Fountainhead is superior to Atlas Shrugged, or at least superior for a Ayn Rand novice like me?
Ayn Rand, because I think I've gone for the Fountainhead. I've also read a small novella, Anthem, which she wrote while taking a break from writing. And of course, I think 6 or 8 years went past, and she wrote Atlas Shrugged. And reading that, after reading The Fountainhead, at least in its sort of, from the rough reading or something, and I still hold the opinion now that it feels like a bloated version of the whole thing. In fact, it borderlines on self-parody. Like, basically, it was 700 pages long, but each one of those 700 pages felt, tight-knit. It felt like it was compelling. There was a drive. But then, with the length of Atlas Shrugged, it just became just tiresome and it felt like it was retreading ground constantly.
Yeah.
Why would I go for this chore of a book if I could go for something for less and get the same out of it, in fact, even more so out of it.
Okay, well, that's good. Interesting.
Awesome.
All right. So you mentioned just then that the Fountainhead was a kind of stepping stone for you to being sort of at least on your way to being more conservative, and I think that's pretty typical of sort of late teenage men in particular, right? Sort of reading Ayn Rand and then sort of feeling
it's the old typical story of how people saw Ayn Rand. In fact, it's pretty much every single, I think at least, the likes of Yaron Brooks, who was the head of the Ayn Rand Institute, and Leonard Peikoff and all that. They basically, it's always the same story. I read Atlas Shrugged or The Fountainhead or whatever, and it changed my life. That's it from there.
Yeah, that reminds me. Did you want to quickly go over our idea for the modern day Fountainhead adaptation?
Yes, let's do it.
Spoilers, we're going to be talking about the plot of the film, but the plot of Fountainhead. But this originally came from me telling you when I was reading The Fountainhead at the end of the story, when Rourke blows up the I can't remember what the building's called, but the building that
it was a housing complex.
A housing complex. He blows up this sort of skyscraper or housing complex that he built. And anyway, I was thinking about the ending of Fight Club, and I was thinking about a modern version of The Fountainhead, where Howard Rourke's watching this building getting blown up, and like "Where Is My Mind" by the Pixies is playing.
And we were messaging back and forth, but I think on the fly we ended up conceiving the idea of a modern adaptation of Fountainhead. It said it's a video game developer.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
He builds an amazing video game.
And none of the major studios can handle him, so he goes indie.
Yeah.
And then Dominique Francon. Exactly. It's like what Phil Fish sees in his mind.
Yeah. No, but we don't want to go into video games too much, but I seriously think Fez is like an amazing work of art in terms of video games. But
I haven't played it, but I've heard good things about it.
No, it's amazing, yeah.
Inspired to the antics of the developer.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he's exactly like Howard Rourke, because he created this amazing thing, but he's a complete arsehole.
Exactly.
Because he knows how good it is, and he's has no time for people who says that it's not good.
Like that.
Sorry for the abrupt ending, but it's getting late now, and Ford had to go home, so I'm going to have to wrap it up for you today, but we will be continuing this conversation at a later date.
Thank you for inviting me on.
No problem at all. As always, please leave your comments in the comment section, and I'll try to pass them on to Ford as much as possible, and perhaps if you have any questions for Ford, you could ask them and we'll address them in the next video. Yeah, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching.